Hi there, I'm Matt Farrar. This is Joe Clements. We're the co-founders of Strategic Digital Services in Tallahassee, Florida. We wanted to come to you live today and have a discussion about some of the changes that Facebook is making that are affecting political campaigns, and most specifically how digital media relates to those political campaigns. We're going to take some live questions, so if you've got a question for us, you can submit it right in the comments below. But we're also going to try and tackle some of the bigger picture issues from the results of the Cambridge Analytica story recently, what changes Facebook is making and how that could affect political campaigns throughout the 2018 election cycle. So Rebecca, do you have any questions to start us off?
Sure do. First question. So people keep asking how the new Facebook changes affect campaigns. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll take that. So Facebook, a couple of weeks ago, did a media panel and announced a series of changes. Most important thing, I think, for any local or state elected official or campaign, it looks like right now it only applies to federal, so that's probably the most important thing to keep in mind. But number two, for federals, it's all pretty basic stuff, proving the identity, proving that you're with an organization like a political committee or campaign. And that's fine. Most of the stuff anybody does in professional digital politics, you're claiming who you are for the most part. What's interesting there, what I think is going to be really tough on federal races, I'm interested to see how Facebook works this, is the requirement to have an archive, a campaign archive where any ads that page has run for the past 4 years, anybody can go look and take a look at the ad creative, who it was targeted to, how much was spent, all the details on it. And so the issue there is if you're a campaign and you're wanting targeted persuasion, well, your opposition just needs to go click that button and get an idea for what your strategy is. Matt, what's your take on that one?
I completely agree. I think there's a huge risk. We don't know all of the details of how that archive is going to work yet. So the big X factor there is what level they set the targeting options at. So if you're not familiar with Facebook, there's a campaign level, an ad set, and then an ad within the ad set. So if they set the options that anyone can look at to be at the campaign level, that probably makes a scenario where it's pretty easy to go in and put either some dummy ads in or just expand your targeting just to kind of keep it across the board so that it's really difficult to reverse engineer what your strategy is. If Facebook sets it so that you can see each ad set individually and what the targeting parameters for, so if you're targeting, let's say, Republican voters between the ages of 35 and 54, that gets a little more detailed into what a campaign strategy is and could possibly reveal, what ads they're targeting to different sectors of the electorate and could create some problems.
Yeah, so I want to throw out another thing there that a lot of people don't point out. It's like, I don't think it matters to a legitimate marketer. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they always, the rules on these platforms change all the time, and if you're not in them on the back end, you don't see this. But Facebook must update their business manager, their ads manager monthly. It changes. What you can do changes, what you can't do changes all the time. So I think from a marketing perspective, everybody's just going to figure it out. Facebook may lose some revenue off this, candidly, if it's an open book for your opposition to see, but people will still spend. They'll just spend on, some more broadly targeted generic stuff on Facebook. But I think at the end of the day, marketers are going to figure it out. Facebook is still the best value in the history of advertising. To this
100%.
day, on Facebook, you can reach 1,000 people, 1,000 impressions for $8. You can't do that in mail. You can't do that on TV. You certainly can't speak to 1,000 people live for $8. And so as long as that value is there, marketers are going to keep finding a way to use it.
And I will add that, while the changes to the ad platform could cause them to maybe lose some revenue or have some people spend less revenue with them this election cycle, there's very little evidence that the delete Facebook movement is getting any traction. There is no evidence that there are a large number of people deleting their Facebook accounts or using the platform.
People who didn't use Facebook are deleting their accounts,
right?
But the funny part is no one's deleting Insta. And look, bad news, if you don't like Facebook and you're still like an Insta person, Facebook owns Insta. Like, the same ads are being pushed on Insta that you buy on Facebook.
Yep.
And no one's moving to delete Insta.
No.
That being said, do you guys think those changes affect the value that Facebook provides for advertisers?
There's one. So I do think there's one issue. And so one of the things Facebook did is it stopped, basically third-party data enrichment. So Facebook actually has three different sources for targeting data for an advertiser. So your first source for targeting data is going to be, Facebook knows like you liked Coca-Cola, and so you can target people who like Coca-Cola. Or Facebook knows, you like, Walmart, and you can target people who like Walmart. So it's data that Facebook has collected because you've taken an action to suggest that to Facebook. Item number two is data that you upload to Facebook. So you can take an email list, you can take an address like a customer list, a voter file, upload it, and target those folks on Facebook. Facebook did a thing there that I actually think hurts marketer confidence in that tool. And so it used to be if you uploaded your list, Facebook would tell you if you uploaded 1,000 people on a list, here's how many people match. So you know how many people you can address on Facebook. So you would upload 1,000 people and 860 would match. Well, now for custom audiences, Facebook does not show that information. You upload and then it's NA for audiences. So you now no longer know how many people Facebook's able to match. And then the third thing, which I think was the biggest value prop Facebook had going for it in terms of advertising, was they would let some data aggregators match to Facebook profiles. And so, larger data brokers, like Axiom and Datalogix, would take Facebook's data and enrich it with, estimated household income, are they in the market for a car, what type of car could they drive, like in-depth consumer data. It's used all the time in mail, by the way. If you wonder why you get so much annoying mail when you move or when you buy a car, like that's why. And that's the primary source of this. But Facebook was matching to it, and that was incredible value add. Facebook announced a couple weeks ago it's not going to do that anymore, which in our in politics, like that, we have voter files, and so we can get around that pretty easy. But if you're a business, and especially if you're a small business, like that stinks, because that was a powerful targeting mechanism that allowed you to maximize the value of $100 in spend. Because if you had a boutique baby shop in Winter Park, Florida, you could target to people with household incomes over $100,000 who are expecting a child or have a child under 2 years old, and target those people directly into zip codes. Can't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. I think the important thing, though, and you mentioned this early on, but I think the important thing there to remember is this isn't the first time there's been any kind of shakeup in the advertising industry, right? This is the business of marketing. Platforms are always going to change. Sometimes those changes are inconvenient, but that's why there's an entire business built around this industry to figure out ways to adapt to those changes. It just means in most cases we have to find new ways of targeting people. It means we have to find new ways of outreach and new ways of getting the information to serve relevant content to the right audience, whether we're talking about a political campaign or whether you're talking about the baby store in downtown Winter Park.
Yeah, roger that.
What are your thoughts on Mark Zuckerberg's recent testimony in front of Congress?
So I'll take that one. I watched most of it. I actually thought Mark Zuckerberg did a really good job. I mean, he sat up there and took some medicine, like most people had, something aggressive or not nice to say to him, to say to Facebook. But I thought he did a really good job of maintaining composure, of answering questions in an informative way. And look, he had a lot of people that didn't understand Facebook, didn't understand how the platform works, firing questions at him for hours over a course of 2 days. And I think that would put a lot of stress on anyone, and he handled it about as well as anyone possibly could, having to do things as basic as explaining how his platform worked at a very entry level.
Yeah, I mean, look, I thought one is when I heard that, I was skeptical. I thought that's a pretty bad idea to because this is a guy that had a panic attack speaking at a conference 5 or 6 years ago. He's not a great public speaker. That seems to be fixed. So I was skeptical for that, and I was skeptical for Facebook to have 2 straight days of spotlight on the company. What ended up happening in that play is what everybody saw is we want, if you're we want Congress to regulate, and then you see Congress has no idea what's going on, they're asking Mark Zuckerberg to fix their email for them. All of a sudden you think, oh, it's probably not a very good idea that we ask Congress to regulate this platform. So I think they did themselves a big favor by candidly showing Congress to be somewhat inept at knowing what is the Facebook. They didn't appear. It was very clear they were reading talking points written by younger age,
100%.
which is the case in most congressional testimonies. This was a little bit more, I think, exaggerated though, because so many people in normal life know what Facebook is and knows how it works, and most people don't know, like maybe how the oil and gas industry works, so you don't notice it as much. But it was pretty clear.
I mean, it was clear.
The
watching.
memes were fantastic.
Yeah.
The Mark Zuckerberg congressional question memes were amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty clear watching that testimony that, a couple of the members that questioned him, there were a couple of examples where they said, "Well, you commit today to doing X, Y, Z," and his response was that literally that's how the platform works. Like, it already does that. But they just went right back to, "Well, you commit right now on the record to doing this." Like, yes, that's how it works already. So, I mean, obviously a basic understanding of how the platforms work.
Yeah, and look, there's another part of that, like, and I think he pointed this out in one of the 900 questions he took, is like Facebook doesn't actually have an incentive to sell your data.
No.
Facebook's value is keeping all of its data to Facebook. Like the data that's exposed on the marketer end, on our side, is generic. It's, are you between 24 and 34, live in a house worth over $200,000.
And we still don't get those names,
like
right?
a minivan.
They're still
Yeah.
just to create an ad targeting audience. I mean, he said this multiple times. Facebook does not sell their data anywhere, and that's still true. Now, in the Cambridge Analytica situation, that they found a way to get around that by, convincing people to opt into something that exposed information. But, I mean, at no point does Facebook actually take your information.
I don't think they convince people, right? They had the opt-in,
Right.
like the click here to, Facebook, and everybody clicks those indiscriminately. Like
Sure.
this is like the great myth that if only consumers were more informed, like there's literally a button that says, can Facebook have access and information about your contacts, and it will include X, Y, Z. And
Sure.
it's not even in the fine print. It's right there in the large print, but you want that personality test because you need to know right away if you're compatible with the girl you just met at the bar. So
Obviously.
you download it and you push yes.
The interesting thing that I thought, I mean, and maybe this was intentional, maybe it wasn't, that he didn't respond with is people kept asking, why do you make these terms of service and these user agreements so long? Because no one's going to read them. And I think that's fair. I don't think anybody at this table or watching this broadcast probably reads through that entire user agreement for just about any service they use. But, I mean, my response to that is because we live in a litigious society. So knowing that you have to account for literally thousands of things that you could be sued for or get in trouble for, like, of course that user agreement is going to be thousands of words. It has to be. So, I mean, if that's truly something that Congress or any other regulatory body wants to fix, then they need to fix the lawsuits and the legal system that can take advantage of not spelling every single thing out in, legal jargon for a user.
While we're on this topic, we have a live question from Anna from Fort Lauderdale. Does the narrative that Facebook is selling information harm Facebook users?
Does it harm Facebook users? I mean, again, like, Facebook doesn't sell your information anywhere. So, I think, obviously, their stock price has taken a hit. So, I think the stories that have resulted, in this scandal or whatever you'd like to call it, have certainly hurt them. I don't still think there's any evidence that users are actually going to make the decision to drop the platform, or at least do so en masse. And again, there's some regulatory challenges that will probably come out of it, and some advertising challenges.
I mean, look, it's a lot of pearl clutching, right? Like, oh, they've got my data. Like, but at the end of the day, no one's changing their behavior. Like,
Correct.
we are a decade into this model, which consumers chose very early. Like, going the free route on the internet goes back to, like, when we were, in the late 90s, and like you downloaded things on Napster, right? Like, the expectation of the internet from its inception, for better or worse, has almost always been, it's going to be freely available to me and supported by some other means, whether it's straight copyright theft or ad supported or something like that. That's the expectation of consumers on the internet. There appears to be very little willingness to change that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people, they're taking my data, and then they go to Facebook and then post about how upset they are on Facebook.
How are your Farmville cows doing?
Well, dude, I mean,
Excellent.
I'm a very successful Farmville farmer.
Good.
Yeah.
As digital consultants with a lot of political clients, how do you think campaigns will adjust to the new rules?
So state, local probably doesn't change. Federal, I don't know. We were thinking about this in the car on a trip last week. Like, two things. One is it's not clear exactly what the details of the rules are going to be, because that matters a lot. Like, when you change the rules of the game, it actually matters. Like, what is the rule of the game? Like, the NFL does this every year. They have league meetings. Like, we're going to change kickoffs, right? But it matters, like, how they change kickoffs. Like, do they just move the ball? Like, do they start the players closer together? Do they not allow tackling? Like, that matters. And that's kind of what Facebook said. Like, Facebook said they're going to change a broad thing, but haven't provided the details, and the details matter for how campaigns adjust. I'll tell you this, if it is as rigid as, what seems to be suggested, that it'll be fully transparent, people will buy, like, they'll buy their bio pieces on Facebook, they'll do kind of their big issue stuff, but you're not going to see the type of micro-targeting that, the Obama 8 and 12 campaign pioneered coming in on that platform, because the opposition is going to look and be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, they're targeting X demographic. That must be something they've seen a weakness in their polling and adjust. Like,
there's a fair amount of reverse engineering you can do if you know a decent amount of information there.
Well, because in a competitive campaign, both campaigns are polling,
sure,
right? And so what you're really looking at in competing campaigns is you're very oftentimes seeing two campaigns take on the same situation, like, and adjusting a strategy that best fits them. And so if you see, like, oh, that campaign is going for, X group of, millennial women with children,
right?
Well, that is a huge advantage to know, because then you either adjust, do you go compete there, or do you seed that group and double your resource into a place that's being left behind? Because here's the thing you also know, what's being left behind. And that's important. Like, who they're not talking to. You know where the open water is.
For those watching, can you specify why you think there will be no impact for local and state campaigns?
So Facebook has said that they are not that they haven't said they're not. What they've said is this will apply to federal races. So it doesn't look like there's, and look, for Facebook, it would be a administrative nightmare to do every state and local election. Federal's a big enough world, but if you throw every state and local, like, they couldn't. The amount of manpower it takes Facebook, for example, to do something like, Facebook said it was hiring 10,000 new censors to look at content on the platform for fake news or whatever, and that's on top of the 10,000 they already have. So there's 20,000 people who work for Facebook who are just constantly reviewing content. You would probably need to do this for every state and local election, and also, like, ballot initiative. Man, you need 500 people doing it full time.
Well,
you would need specialists in each state.
Yeah.
And then you would probably need, for your bigger cities, specialists in that cities.
In order for this archive that they're creating to be effective, to be something that, like they've said, a journalist or an average citizen could go in and search, the only way it's useful is if it's actually sorted by state, by district, by some means of looking at it. When you have if you're looking at it system-wide and you're talking about thousands and tens of thousands of county commission and city commission and special districts, those change on a regular basis, and there's a lot of variables there. With federal races, there are a set number of congressional districts. There are going to be a finite number of candidates running in those congressional districts, and a third of U.S. Senate seats that are up for election.
And one rule set nationally.
So it's a very clear set number of races, and then a finite number of candidates in those races. I mean, expanding it to every race in the country is an exponential project, and that doesn't mean they won't do it in 2020, right? But
we'll be outraged at the next thing by 2020.
Of course we will.
In 2018, we'll find another platform to be out. We'll be mad at Snapchat, or we'll be mad at,
almost certainly, yeah.
I mean, we'll find something else to be angry at, and then Facebook will, just kind of probably level off where it's at in terms of, new rules and regs for political stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I'd like to get your thoughts on how these changes will impact businesses, especially those that are non-political.
Yeah, so I think this is why we can't have nice things. Is the political side spoiled that, like, third party data matching for and I think Mark Zuckerberg actually said this in the testimony, but he made this argument that look, Facebook is the best value in the history of advertising, hands down, and it's also the simplest. If you run a cupcake shop down the street, like, you don't need to go hire a marketing agency to promote your business on Facebook and target the people you think are going to be Facebook basically, when you set up a fan page, begs you constantly to spend $10 to boost your post.
So they make it real easy for you to give them their credit card.
Yeah. You just take the picture. It puts all the credit card information automatically into Facebook. But for small businesses, being able to be really lean and micro-targeted with what you're doing keeps that ad cost down and makes the ROI on those ads really good. For a bigger business, for a bigger campaign, even, but so imagine like a Procter & Gamble, for example. It doesn't matter if their Facebook ads are 10% less efficient. Like, these are companies that buy TV by the billions every year. Like, targeting doesn't matter as much. Like, it matters at the small and medium-sized business margin. It matters for smaller campaigns, but that has gone away, at least from now, and probably to the detriment of the smaller players in the Facebook platform versus the bigger ones.
I'll add the caveat that I guess it also kind of depends on what if Facebook goes beyond the federal level, what they decide is issue advocacy and what's not.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of businesses that have something to say about regulation, about policy, about any number of things that might affect their business that aren't at least considered by the people making them political speech, right? So at what level are those things included in these changes to the ad platform, or are they excluded? Because that's going to make a big difference on what a business owner decides to talk about or not talk about on their Facebook page and promote to an audience, if all of a sudden they're going to be included in a political database.
Yeah, look, that's the danger of the whole thing, right?
Who is deciding?
Who's deciding? But one, the
precedent
precedent that, like, if you so we have a First Amendment, like, you have free speech, but a company can be regulated. So if a company like Facebook is the platform that some percentage of speech is happening on, the government can pressure that private company to limit speech on that platform. And so, like, I think that is a serious issue. If we're going to have a handful of large digital platforms that account for 80% of communication on the internet, person to person, like, we probably want to have as robust of speech available there as possible to us, and not have different parties controlling Congress pressuring that company every 2 years to limit certain forms of speech that are critical of that government or disagreeable to the ideology of that government.
Yep. All right. Well, that's all we've got. That's all the questions we've got for today. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching this after it aired originally and you've got a question, feel free to still drop it in the comments below, and we'll take a stab at answering it in the comments for you. But thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.